expertise. And the Four Nations face-off wrapped up, and it was very exciting to watch. Canada took home the victory in an overtime win. Here to talk about it with me today is Christian Versuch and Mason Branham. Now, guys, like I just mentioned, this event was exciting. It was very exciting for hockey and just sports in general. So, Christian, talk about the game. What was Canada's key to victory?
I think that really Canada just benefited from it being the second matchup. I think that we really threw everything we had at them the first time, and that Canada came in making the defensive adjustments that we, quite frankly, didn't make. I think that Sam Bennett, Nathan McKinnon, they came in on the attack for Canada, and we just had no answer for them, sadly.
Yeah, and Mason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think with this being the second matchup, it was a lot of, anticipation with the rematch. And I think there was a lot just going into kind of with having that second match. Obviously, U.S.-Canada, it's been a rivalry for years. And I think Canada, after that first defeat, kind of used that as motivation to go into the championship game. And I think they used that fuel to win this game.
Is there anything that, Mason, anything Canada did differently that they brought into the second game? Because it really was a big difference. Obviously, Canada got more done on the offensive end.
Yeah, I think just that offense was able to perform better than the first game. I think one of the things kind of looking at that game was the U.S. and Canada, the shot disparity. It was a little bit, nothing too crazy, but still Canada was able to take more advantage of those shots where U.S. wasn't really able to. But I think just overall, there was a lot going into that game. But again, Canada's offense, obviously Connor McDavid, he's the star of the team. He really took over in that overtime period and won the game. But I think he helped let this offense to a win.
Yeah, Christian?
Yeah, and I think going back to the shot disparity, Jake Sanderson for the American team, he was really trying to get the ball or to get the puck down to the attack, but they really struggled to get it moving when they did. Canada's defense just got it right back, and they're like Mason was saying, Connor McDavid on the attack, the U.S. had no answer for that.
Yeah, for sure. America does have to bounce back. Obviously, they will play Canada again, most likely next year in the Olympics. So what does America have to do to bounce back, Christian, for their next chance at international play?
I really don't think that this American team, that it's I don't think that they have to do much next time. I think that this team was very young and that they'll age into a great group together. We have Zach Werenski, he's only 27 on the defense. Austin Matthews, 27. The Tkachuk brothers, they're 25 and 27 respectively. This team is going to be playing together for a long time. They're going to be fun to watch. And the Canadian team, as great as they are, they're aging out. They have a lot of 30-year-olds, 30-plus, and I don't think that they last together much longer.
Yeah, Mason?
Yeah, I definitely think age is going to play a factor here. I think, as the team gets better and as the team gets more experience playing with each other, I think that's going to play a huge role. But I think there's going to be a couple guys that we might see get closer, Robinson or Ben or guys like that. Those are guys you're going to see get closer to Olympic time, starting to get phone calls like, hey, we want you on Team USA, we need you, will you come play for us? And, some will say yes, some will say no, probably similar to how the NBA did it with the Olympics. But I definitely could say that U.S. is going to be more prepared going into the Olympics against Canada.
Oh, yeah, for sure. America does have a lot of work to do with their roster. Mason, is there anyone else you would like to see America call up for next year?
Yeah, definitely. I think Robinson would be a nice guy to see. Ben would be a nice guy to see. I know there's a couple guys from here and there, maybe just different players, from different teams. I know there's a couple guys on Vegas that would be a lot of fun to see. But I think there's definitely some phone calls to make. But I still think this team, as it is now, is a good team. Again, they're just a young, inexperienced team. And as time goes on, as they get more chemistry and develop more and play together more, I think that's going to help build that chemistry. And, it's going to help them on the ice. And I think that's going to give them a lot of edge going into next Olympics. And I think that's going to help them win.
Yeah, Christian?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Four Nations tournament, international play in general, would benefit a lot from younger prospects getting the call-up. For example, Matthew Lansing, Cole McKinney, both of these, they're American prospects. They're currently rocking on the under-18 team, but next time we come around, they'll be, in the Olympics, they'll be almost 20. For the Four Nations tournament, they'll definitely be over 18, most likely in the draft, maybe already drafted. So I think that it could be very interesting to see young players represent their nation as well.
Oh, yeah, 1,000%. You want your young stars to play on the biggest stage.
Absolutely.
But speaking of the biggest stage, that's where hockey was at the forefront in front of the entire sports landscape. They broke viewership records. It was just huge for the game of hockey. So Mason, talk about the Four Nations as a whole. How big of it was it for the sport?
I mean, I would say it's one of, if not the biggest hockey event like of all time. I think with what the NHL was able to do with the Four Nations, obviously, you know, a lot of people came in knowing, oh, it's probably going to be, you know, U.S. and Canada like it is every year. But Sweden and the other two teams, they were able to really put up a good fight. I mean, yes, they might not have gotten the result they wanted, but there were still a lot of good games. And I think overall, if you kind of look at it comparatively, you know, you look at the NHL compared to the NBA, there's a lot of things that people are talking about with the NBA that they did wrong. Whereas with the NHL, there's a lot of things they did right. And I think, honestly, the NBA can use what the NHL did as kind of a learning curve, you know, say, hey, this is how we need, you know, this is how they did their All-Star weekend, you know, maybe not necessarily copy the exact same thing, but say, hey, you know, we can take a couple things here and there and learn from it and, you know, maybe make both All-Star weekends great, and that would be just great for sports fans in general.
Yeah, Christian?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the NBA could absolutely steal an idea like the Four Nations tournament. Like we had Finland, Sweden, the U.S., and Canada. In the NBA, we have a lot of other countries that are represented as well. They could have more teams, or they could group together like Europe and Asia into a team and have it be like a continental cup. But I think there's a lot of options, and even the MLB, like with how many international players we have in the MLB, like I think that's a big idea for sports leagues going forward to do international play.
Yeah, I think a lot of sports leagues are going to be very influenced by what we just witnessed in hockey. It was such a huge success, but let's just stick with hockey for a second. Obviously, this replaced the All-Star game this year. It was very new, very different for a lot of these players. And with how successful it was, Christian, do you think this event or events like this in the future could replace the All-Star game?
I really do. I honestly think that the All-Star game has just been a broken format for the past few years now. Like players, especially in a sport like hockey, like it's not worth the risk to get injured playing full force in this game that's more of a celebration than a real game. There's no stakes to be had. And I think that that's really impacted the quality of play in the game, and that a Four Nations tournament like we saw like completely negates that problem. The players are proud to play for the flag on their shoulder, and I think that that really shows and will be an improvement if they choose to permanently replace the All-Star game with this.
Yeah, Mason?
I think I could see something where maybe you alternate. Maybe one year you do an All-Star game, one year you do a Four Nations or something. Or maybe, you know, you have an All-Star weekend 1 week, and then maybe at like the beginning of the season or close to the end, you have the Four Nations. But I definitely think the Four Nations is here to stay, and I think it should be something that stays, because this, I think, shows that not all All-Star weekends are really the same. I think it showed that while hockey, yes, it is a physical sport, hockey players are still, you know, risking their, you know, bodies, risking their lives, risking injury. They're risking a lot going out there. And for them to still say, hey, we want to go out there, we want to play for a team. And I think another thing, kind of looking at it, it was interesting, was seeing teammates on different countries. You know, you have a couple pairs of teammates that are, you know, that could be best friends, but when it came to Four Nations, they didn't talk, they didn't speak, they didn't do anything, because it wasn't about the team, it was about their country. And I think that's something that, again, that the NBA can take. I think there's a lot of things that the NHL did right, and I think the NHL should keep this format going.
Yeah, 1,000%. It was a huge success, but I want to talk about something different, because the NHL is a very physical sport, and with these high-stake games, they are happening right at the All-Star break. So do you think that really, should this take place right in the middle of the season, or do you believe that it should take place like the NFL, like right after the season, Christian?
I think that that's a great point to bring up. Like we were talking about injuries with the All-Star game, the injury risk isn't gone with the Four Nations. And although the players might not mind doing it for their flag, the teams that pay them those $1 million contracts are definitely getting anxious watching their players out there. So I think that that's definitely a conversation the league's going to have going forward, whether it should be an off-season thing or during the All-Star break like we just had it.
Yeah, without a doubt, the future of hockey is on the rise. And coming up next, we will talk about another team that's on the rise in the Dallas Mavericks.
Must be tricked into thinking that there's a happy ending here. I think that's so powerful. The true story of Ruth Snyder. There's some kind of liberties in the story. The young woman is definitely more of a sympathetic character than the original Ruth Snyder.
I would say that it is a story about a woman breaking out of the box she has been put in by society.
It is a story about societal pressures, and it's also a story about love and what drives somebody to sometimes do things that may seem awful.
I really like the soundscapes. I think that they add a nice layer to the show.
Be prepared for an incredibly immersive, anxiety-ridden experience.
How she sees the world and the way that she sees these different faces all the time. This is like how the machine rolls.
Welcome back in the Sports Zone. The Dallas Mavericks are back in action after their All-Star break, and so far we've had a little bit of mixed results. Here to join with me to talk about it today is Griffin Flack and Valentina Rojas. Now, guys, let's start off with this New Orleans game that took place on Friday. It was a big back-and-forth game, but the Mavericks pulled it out. Griffin, what are your thoughts?
I mean, we're going to have to take a look at who they played. They played the Pelicans. You can't really take much into account for that game. The Pelicans are tanking for Cooper Flag right now. Kyrie had 35 points. He's going to have to continue that if the Mavs want to continue to play well. I know we're going to talk about the Sunday game, which I have a lot to say about that. And Max Christie had 16 points. He's continued to play really well since the Luka trade. So, I mean, they did play the Pelicans, only beat them by 8 points, which against a team like that, you have to be able to just get out of the game by the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and Val, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. Obviously, Kyrie Irving scored 35 points. He shot 11 from the 22. And P.J. Washington also contributed a lot to the game, 24 points and 7 rebounds. However, I do agree, it is the Pelicans. If they didn't win this, I would be very concerned. They did, but not by a lot. And obviously, they're struggling a little bit. We have injured players from left to right. And so I think the rest of the team needs to step up a little bit, create more of that team ambience, and definitely they held. But it was just in the fourth quarter that they finally put that advantage to themselves. Throughout the whole game, you didn't really know what was going to happen, and it was in the last 4 minutes or so that they were able to, put those three-pointers.
Against teams like that, the starters should be out by the beginning of the fourth quarter. You can't play your starters that deep into the game against a team who's tanking.
Yeah. Do you think that's more, Griffin, with injuries going on with Dallas? Obviously, no AD, no Daniel Gafford, no Derek Lively. Do you think that's more the attribute to the loss?
Yeah, it for sure is. When AD is healthy, and we all know this, he is a top 10 player undeniably when he's healthy. And Gafford is a really solid center, and Lively is a solid rookie. Or he was a rookie last year, but he's a solid center. I mean, yeah, they definitely, if they get all their centers back, they have no centers, no big men right now, so they're kind of playing small. They're kind of getting beat on the glass. They got beat on the glass by the Warriors, who aren't a very big team themselves.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, let's go back to that Warriors game. Obviously, it was yesterday, and it started off good in the first quarter, but then just kind of spiraled out of control. Obviously, they lost to a big margin to the new Jimmy Butler-led Golden State Warriors. Valentina, what were your thoughts on that game? Number
one, turnovers were a disaster. Stephen Curry dominated. You have Jimmy Butler, his home debut again, It was pretty good for them. On our side, it wasn't good. Kyrie Irving and Washington, they both did 17 points together. Their defense, where was it? I don't know. It was very, very hard to watch because, one, we were just talking about this outside. I feel like you had Irvin and Luka as the duo, and he's a great team player. He's taking that leadership. But if the rest of the team is not putting their 2 cents in, then nothing is going to happen, and you're not going to see. if they keep going this, they're just going to keep going down. Like all the other teams in the Western Conference are, trying to move up, trying to do what they can with the players they have. But we're just having injuries. We're having terrible defense. Our centers are not doing what they need to do. So I think it was a horrible game.
Yeah, I mean, if the Mavs want a chance to compete without AD right now and possibly get out of the play-in, Kyrie's going to have to go back to 2016 Kyrie. Max Christie's going to have to continue to do what he's been doing. And the centers are going to have to be healthy. That's just the thing. The Warriors had 17 offensive rebounds, and the Mavs gave up 60 points in the paint. You just can't do that and expect to win big games like the Warriors.
Right. There are a lot of games left to play. Obviously, this weekend was kind of mixed, but there's a lot of opportunity to jump up past the play-in and into the 6th seed. Currently, they are 1 game back of the Clippers for that 6th seed spot. So, Griffin, what do the Mavs need to do to climb up these rankings?
Well, right now the Mavs have the 14th hardest schedule. The Clippers have the 6th hardest schedule. So, since they're 1 game back, they can easily climb ahead of the Clippers. But the T-Wolves, who are the 7th seed right now, have the 3rd easiest remaining schedule. So I think that the T-Wolves will climb into that 6th spot, and the Mavs will either have to play 1 or 2 games to get the opportunity to face, more than likely, the Thunder or the Nuggets in the first round. And they have had the Thunder's number in the past, but I mean, the Thunder's playing so well, I don't think they beat them 4 times in a series, and the Nuggets have the best player in the world in Jokic. So it's tough. They better hope they climb into that 6th spot.
Yeah, Val?
Completely with that, but I think what they need to work on a lot more than focusing on the games coming up for them, it's just the rebounds and being on the court. That's what they need to work on right now. Obviously, AD is injured, so what are they going to do with that? If they really, imagine, Kyrie Irving gets injured, what are they going to do? Rely on Washington, rely on Thompson? Like, what are they going to do? They need to start utilizing their bench and preparing them for what's coming, because if something happens, I don't think any of their other players are going to be able to get the leadership of a 7-game, season, game. So I think they need to work on that. They need to really, focus on their defense and their centers, and just hope that when they do face their opponents, they're ready and they give it their all.
Yeah, definitely. Injuries have been a big part of the Mavericks season so far in the second half. Obviously, no Anthony Davis. We mentioned the 2 centers are also out. So that means a lot of players have had to step up in roles they're not comfortable in, like Kessler Edwards playing some center. Are there any other players, Val, you think need to step up in order for the Mavericks to really stay afloat?
Yeah, obviously, Kyrie Irving needs to, step it up a little bit, because he's doing amazing. He's a team model right now, but he needs to open up more to, find his duo again. And on top of that, we also need Klay Thompson to step it up. Daniel Gafford, I think he's very underrated. If he does well, then we can have a consistency there. And my top pick for that is PJ Washington. He doesn't have the consistency that we need, but he's been doing great in recent performances with 24 points against the Pelicans and 17 against the Warriors. So I think he's going to be a great asset, and he could probably be a good thing for us to work on.
I'm going to start with Kyrie. Like I said, Kyrie has to go back to his 2016 Game 7 against the Warriors self. And I'm going to go with Klay Thompson. He can't be washed Klay Thompson anymore with AD out and Gafford out and Lively out. He's got to sort of somewhat channel that old Klay Thompson. And then I'm going to go with Max Christie. Just continue to play well for Max Christie. He's a great defender. He's an underrated piece of that Luka trade. And he's been consistent, and that's what I'm looking forward to most is Max Christie.
Yeah, let's talk about him for a second. Max Christie has been amazing for the Dallas Mavericks. He was kind of like the throw-in player, like the young guy that you had to throw in instead of draft picks. But he's been playing some really great basketball. 15 points per game since he's been traded. Griffin, how well has he been playing?
He's been playing so well. I'm a Lakers fan. I did not want to lose Max Christie, but hey, you're getting Luka Doncic. Max Christie is an underrated defender. He's feisty. He gets his hands on the ball a lot, and he's gained his confidence before the trade with the Lakers, and it just transferred over to the Mavericks.
And Val?
I completely agree with that. I think as a Celtics fan, I really didn't put a lot of attention into other players and people that were not in my team. But I think, 1, he was starting to shine at the Lakers. 2, when he came to the Mavs, I think it was perfect for him because, yes, you have big talent in the Mavs right now, but with Luka gone, people are paying attention to him. We're looking at what the team can do with the new assets, and especially with Davis out. he's getting his time to shine. He's being consistent. It is not something that I see Dallas people talk about like this was a horrible trade because he's been bad. No, he's been putting his 2 cents into the sport and he's been shining. So I think we're going to see a lot of good things coming from him.
Yeah, he's going to need to continue to shine if the Mavericks want to replicate what they did last year. They are in very familiar territory at the 8th seed, and in the second half of the season, they climbed up to 5th and ended up going all the way to the NBA Finals. Val, do you think something similar could happen for the Mavericks again, or is it not the same?
I don't think the magic can be recreated because the magic is gone, you know? But I don't think they're going to recreate it. I think they're going through a lot of things right now. If they do recreate it, I would love for the Celtics to win again, you know? But I'm saying that they've been struggling, just what we're saying, injuries, the rebounds, their centers, everything. And if they do keep struggling with that, do you think like the players we have can be trusted in a 7-game series? I don't think so. I think the best thing we can hope for them right now is to start climbing up and maybe get a chance, you know?
All right, that's going to do it for our Mavericks talk. Coming up next, we're going to talk about another team that's on the rise in the UNC Mean Green.
Has this ever happened to you?
My bike is gone.
Stolen bikes are an epidemic sweeping college campuses across America.
What am I supposed to do?
It's quite simple. The We Mean Green Fund has partnered with the UNT Police Department to offer free bike locks to any UNT student with a bike. Just show up with your bike in tow and ask.
Now I'll never lose my bike ever again.
Enough worrying. Get your bike lock today.
Craving something fresh, flavorful, and made just for you? Look no further than Avesta, your go-to destination for a delicious, full-service dining experience. Dive into our customizable omelets, expertly crafted by our talented cook Jonathan, who guarantees every bite is perfection. All our dishes are handmade, prepared with only the freshest ingredients. Explore our assembly line where you can choose from any of our globally inspired dishes, or customize your plate. It's that easy. And let's not forget dessert. Indulge your sweet tooth with treats from Clark Bakery. With convenient payment methods including card or flex, it's the perfect dining spot for any occasion. Quench your thirst with our wide selection of drinks. Just hand your drinking card to our friendly waiter, and they'll bring your beverage of choice right to your table. When you're done savoring every last bite, our attentive staff will whisk away your tray. Enjoy the peaceful ambiance as you dine in, or use our takeout option for a meal on the go. Avesta.
Welcome back in the Sports Zone. Now, your UNC men's Mean Green basketball team is on a roll. After a little bumpy shake these last couple of weeks, they are back and they're on a 4-game winning streak. Here to talk about it with me today is Jai Mitchell and Julian Lofgren. Now, guys, they've been playing some really great basketball at the right time right before March. Jai, I'm going to start with you. Recap this last game against USF. It almost slipped out of their hands a little bit, but they were able to get the win.
UNT got out to a really great start in the first half. I think at a point in time, they even had a 19-point lead. And then in the second half, I feel like they just, it was very hard for them to like regroup and everything with just South Florida. And then South Florida even made it tough. South Florida had the lead at a point in time. And then after they had kind of regained the lead, Jasper hit a very clutch shot. And I feel like that shot sealed the lead. And UNT was able to steal the W.
Yeah, 1,000%. Julian?
Yeah, so for me, I think the big thing was, if you look at the score, UNT won 64-57, but the score doesn't really show how close the game truly was. I think looking up, like he said, UNT at one point was up by 19 points, and then we cut back to the game, and then bang, they're only up by 2 over USF. And I think, like Josh said, I think turnovers played a big role in this one. UNT turned the ball over 14 times, and that just played a big role in allowing USF to get momentum and come back in this game.
Yeah, that's a really big thing for me too. Turnovers, a lot of turnovers. And they've killed the Mean Green in some of these games. I think a lot of these games have been a little bit closer than they needed to. So Julian, how do they fix these turnover issues before the tournament?
Well, one thing is this is the most turnovers they had in the past 3 games. So I think that's one thing that isn't really like them to do. I think this might have just been a bad game, and then, they might have been trying to force stuff. The game gets kind of close. You're trying to force things that bring you out of your comfort zone, stuff that UNT doesn't really do, like trying to shoot the three, going iso ball, stuff that UNT isn't really very good at. They're more of a kind of drive and then dish out as to where, and then maybe run a little pick and roll type of game. Action is more what they do. So I think just making yourself be comfortable in the situations you're in will help UNT limit the amount of turnovers they have.
Yeah, and John?
What is this question again?
Turnovers.
I feel like that kind of killed UNT in the second half. I feel like if UNT would have had probably, I would say 5 turnovers instead of 14, I feel like South Florida would have never known to make a comeback. I feel like in the future, UNT has to clean that up.
Yeah, definitely a lot of fix from this game, but like I mentioned, they are on a 4-game winning streak, so there's a lot to be happy about right now, and a lot of players have stepped up in new roles, and it's really led UNC to a lot of success. Julian, who's a player who's really stepped up?
So I know most people aren't going to see this guy as a big step-up player, but for me, I'm going to go Mule Sissoko, and I know I probably didn't say that first name right, but looking back at the Tulsa game, he had 27 points, a career high. He's a senior. And it seems that he's really kind of coming into his own as we near closer to March, possibly a March Madness run for the Mean Green, but a guy who we're not used to seeing getting this many rebounds. The past 2 games, he's getting over double-digit rebounds, and then he's been consistently putting up 6-8 points every week. So I think just good productivity out of him is really going to help the UNT Mean Green as we get closer to tournament time.
Yeah, season high 27 points for Sissoko against Tulsa a couple games ago. That was huge for the Mean Green. Jai, who's a player that's really stepped up for you?
I feel like Adden has been tremendous for UNT all season long. I feel like he comes through in the clutch when they're needed. He does a very great job bringing that leadership to UNT, and he's just a very great scoring guard that can score anywhere on the court.
Yeah, for a school like UNC who does rely on transfers, especially at their guard positions, he's done a really good job at stepping up. A guy I want to shout out is Jasper Floyd. He's been a little shaky, a little up and down since, again, he is a new transfer here with the turnovers as well, but he had a really big game a couple games ago, not season high, but 18 points, the most since the first game of the year against Evansville. Just wanted to shout him out real quick. Let's talk about their chase for first in the conference. Obviously, they are 1 game back of Memphis for that first game spot and the regular season championship. Jai, with games like FAU, Wichita State, Charlotte, and Temple, really should be easy games on paper. How do you think UNT will close out the year?
I feel like if UNT stays focused and they stay locked in, they're going to get back healthy towards the end of the season. I feel like that's going to help them a lot, just having a full, healthy roster. But I feel like as long as they stay locked in, stay focused, they'll be okay.
Yeah. Julian?
So I think UNT, they just need to win these final 4 games of the year and use these games as kind of confidence boosters so we get ready for the tournament. I think, yes, they're probably looking ahead. Memphis is a game ahead of them. And, Memphis, they do have a tough one coming up. They play UAB, who is tied with UNT. They're a game behind, second in the conference, tied with UNT, like I said. But I think UNT needs to focus more on not Memphis, but focus on just winning these games and controlling what they can control.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be huge coming up for tournament time. Obviously, these 4 games are going to be huge. How do you think UNT will do down this stretch?
I think UNT should be, if looking at the teams they play, they're playing teams with the best team that they're playing has a 500 record, and the other 3 have losing records. So I think UNT shouldn't really struggle in these games. UNT should play very well in these games and shouldn't really fall into any traps. These teams aren't very good teams compared to the rest of the teams in the conference. As where we look at who Memphis has to play, Memphis has to go and play at UAB, a team that is, like I said, tied for second in the conference. So I think Memphis' schedule is a little bit harder than UNT's. But I think UNT, though, just needs to win these Final 4 games if they want a chance to be number 1 seed in the conference.
Yeah, John?
I feel like, to carry on to what he said, I feel like as long as UNT wins out, I feel like they'll have a very great chance of finishing number 1 in the American Conference.
Yeah, 1,000%. And the American Conference is great this year. I wanted to bring up a point that I saw right before the show. Jay Billis had UNC in his top 64 teams on ESPN. And really, that's a great thing because UNC has never really been in a 2-bid conference before. So, Julian, even if we don't win the American in the regular season or the tournament, do you think there's a good chance that UNC can get an outright spot in the tournament?
Looking back, I think so. I think if UNT is able to finish these last 4 games and win all 4 of them, and then maybe not be the number 1 seed in the conference tournament, but be the 2 seed and have a good showing, maybe getting to the 2nd, 3rd round, even maybe the championship game, I think that would be a good enough showing for the committee to see to put UNT in maybe even like a play-in game just to get into the tournament.
Right. And John?
I feel like as long as UNT gets a shot to where they could actually be in a tournament, I feel like they'd do well. I feel like UNT have been waiting for this opportunity to shine in the NCAA tournament. I feel like they're trying to take the next step of trying to play in a bigger stage other than the NIT. So I feel like they are very hungry, and I feel like they'll do what they got to do to get there.
Now, is there anything that UNC has to fix right before tournament time? Because obviously 4-game win streaks are great, but again, we've seen a lot of their flaws come at like the worst possible moments. Obviously the game against USF. Jai, do you think there's anything else that UNC needs to fix?
I feel like UNT needs to clean up the turnovers. They had 14 turnovers last game. They could not do that against a top team in college basketball. That just put them in a very bad situation. I feel like if they clean up the turnovers, they'll be okay.
Yeah, Julian?
I think UNT they need to understand what kind of ball they play. I think when UNT gets away from the kind of ball they play and decides to, oh, you know what, today let's try to start shooting threes. I think that's kind of when UNT gets in trouble. I mean, that's not really playing to their games. So I think UNT needs to understand like what we're good at and kind of stick to that, because when they try to start shooting threes and then come behind teams, then they're forced to shoot threes, something that's not a big strength of theirs.
Yeah, for sure. As UNT men's basketball wraps up their season, UNT softball has just begun.
Hey Alex, this guy on the internet says he wants to give me money.
That sounds suspicious.
What do you mean?
Typically, strangers who promise you money on the internet have their own best interest in mind. They often use bounced checks, which will disappear shortly after depositing, but not before they've asked for some money in return.
So he doesn't really want to spoil me?
No.
Well, then what should I do?
The best way to handle it is to block and report the suspicious message, or even consult local law enforcement if you've already fallen victim.
So I guess we aren't going to Key West for spring break.
No.
There's no harm in wanting to have fun while in college, but it's easy to lose track of how much you've had. Apps like Drink Control and Alkadroid can help keep track of your consumption and blood alcohol levels. If you or someone else does drink too much, the signs of alcohol poisoning are as follows: pale skin, vomiting, confusion, low body temperatures, irregular breathing, blacking out, and is hard to wake up or cannot be woken up.
Dude, are you okay? Hey, what's wrong? Wake up.
It's an exciting time of year, but it's important to be responsible. If you suspect someone is suffering from alcohol poisoning, get help immediately. You will not get in trouble for seeking help if you are underage. For more info and resources, go to UNT's Division of Student Affairs.
Welcome back in the Sports Zone. UNC softball is back, and as the UNC women's took on 3 different teams in the 6th annual Borner Invitational. Here to talk about it with me today is Gabe Ife and Parker Smith. Now, UNC has been a big softball program these past couple of years. Gabe, how do you think they fared in this tournament?
They did a wonderful. That was a great weekend. You know, you love facing teams like UT Arlington because that's a team that's a local rival. You're recruiting against kids for. You know, you have girls growing up, you know, in the Dallas area looking to play softball. UTA and UNT are 2 prominent programs. Coach Rodney DeLong, I know you're going to talk about that a little bit, has done a tremendous job, and he just showed the team that he recruited had really came all together this past weekend. 4 great games, 3 absolute blowouts, and then a good win against a good UTA team.
Yeah, Parker?
Yeah, and I want to just, touch on what he said. Rodney DeLong, I mean, this guy has just done an amazing job with this program. He came in here in 2019. This is a guy that coached at Austin Peay and turned the team around to a 39-win program at Austin Peay. Their first ever winning season in 24 years. Comes to UNC, and he already, in the 6 years, including this season that he's been here, he's already the winningest coach in UNT history. He's a 14-year veteran, and he has the highest winning percentage in conference of all coaches at 68%, a record of 208 and 100. And yeah, over the weekend, I mean, they were really sensational. They won all 4 games, and they're riding a 7-game win streak right now. I mean, it's great whenever you can just kind of dominate those teams like Yale and, Northwestern State has like a putrid 1-10 record. So, good couple of run roll games you get right there, get some momentum going into conference play for the rest of the season. And that's just the type of things you want to see from this team that's really been on the up and coming lately.
It's teams that they should beat, and that they did beat in convincing fashion. They outscored them 38-9 this past weekend, which is something you have to do against, like you're saying, a Yale, Northwestern State, who is 1-10. You have to beat bad teams. Like, a sign of being a good team is beating bad teams badly. And so to be able to do that was impressive this weekend.
Yeah, really you need those get-right games if you are a good team. Really, this might have been a get-right tournament. A lot of these teams, they blew out. They blew out of the water. Let's talk about some players who really stood out to you, because there were a lot of them. Gabe, I'll start with you.
I'll start off with Tatum Sparks. She had a great weekend. You know, she had 4 hits in all 4 games in the tournament, and she's tied the longest on-base streak, 3rd place for that in program history with 21. So she's on fire. She's continued that in from last season. She started out this season really hot. Her bat's been great. And then I'll go into Mackenzie Childers, who really, I just want to go in her performance against Yale on Sunday. She allowed 4 innings. She only allowed 1 hit in those 4+ innings, which you really need. You know, we have another pitcher that I believe you're going to talk about a little bit. And so you really need to kind of have a couple pitchers that are great in softball. You really need that. You can have higher pitch counts, but you really need that success. And so we saw that from her.
Parker?
Yeah, and I have 3 girls that really were sensational over the weekend. Number 1 was Sierra Simon. I mean, that clutch Oppo home run in the 5th inning versus UTA was huge for the Mean Green. On the weekend, 7 for 12, 5 RBIs, 4 runs, 2 home runs, and a stolen base. She was awesome. Elizabeth Moffitt had a grand slam in the 2nd inning versus Northwestern State. She went 3 for 4 in that game, 2 runs, 6 RBIs, also sensational. And then I also want to touch on Skylar Savage as well. Yeah, first team all-conference coming into the year and 6-0 on the season. She spun 7 innings with 5 strikeouts and is posting a 2.44 ERA on the season so far. She has been awesome.
Yeah, they're going to need players like that coming up this Wednesday. It's going to be a huge game for the Mean Green. They will face number 12 Texas Tech right here at Love Field. I hope I said that right. Lovelace Field. Thank you. It will be a huge game this Wednesday at 2 p.m. Parker, what are your thoughts? It's going to be a huge matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've spoken about the success of Rodney DeLong since he's come in here and started coaching this UNT team. But this has been a team that he struggled against. In 2019, when he took over, they've been 2-5 against Texas Tech since he took over. They lost both games last year against them, and they were both at home as well at Lovelace Field. So, you know, the bats have to stay hot, and people have got to step up. I'm looking at, you know, some of the freshmen, some of the underclassmen. You know, Rodney DeLong added 8 freshmen and 3 transfers this year. That's the 2nd most newcomers in program history other than 2021 and, of course, 2004 when the team was originally founded. So those you know, new players kind of have to step up and be big for this team. I'm looking at freshman Alsha Moore. She had a home run and 3 runs in the game versus Yale, and I'm looking for her to have maybe a step-up game and play pretty well against this Texas Tech team. That's going to be a huge challenge.
Gabe?
Yeah, I really want to get into Texas Tech pitching. Texas Tech has a pitcher who goes by the name of Nigeri Kennedy. I could have said that wrong. I apologize on the pronunciation. She's getting paid $1 million in NIL earnings to pitch at Texas Tech. Now, I'm not 100% sure if she'll be pitching this Wednesday, being a midweek game. You know, they might want to save her for the weekend where these early season tournaments she can pitch as much. But if she's pitching, the Mean Green aren't going to have much of a chance. There's a reason why she came from Stanford. She was the best pitcher in college softball last year, and there's a reason why she's getting paid $1 million to come to Texas Tech and be their ace. You know, Tech struggled a little bit in their first couple tournaments, given the expectations. I know they lost to Mississippi State, I believe, the 2nd day after opening day, and then they lost to Texas, which Texas is the #1 team in the country. So, you know, you kind of don't expect a ton from that, but they've had a couple losses against power conference opponents. So this past weekend, they had an invitational up in Lubbock where they were coming off a couple good wins against Indiana, but other than that, didn't face much competition. So they'll be looking at a big game this Wednesday.
Yeah, and it's like they're 12-2, guys. And as Gabe just stated, the only 2 losses that they've had the entire season were both to ranked teams right now. That Mississippi State team is currently ranked 16th in the country, and of course, you just touched on the fact that Texas is literally the best team in the nation. But to me, I think the key for the game for UNC is to not let yourself get in such a big hole early on. They got down 6-0 against Mississippi State, and they kind of crawled their way back into the game, got down 6-5, and then you know the pitchers. Your starting pitcher kind of has to last more than 2 or 3 innings, give your bullpen more of a chance, and they ended up getting run rolled in that game. But if you think about it, if they didn't go down 6-0, I think they would have had a pretty good shot to contend with Mississippi State. So.
Well, you talk about going down 6-0. Texas Tech is averaging over 6 runs a game. So if you get in a hole like that, like you're saying, and you need the offense, like you're talking about the freshman, Aisha Moore, to step up, you really need your offense to respond because it's inevitable that Tech's going to get their runs. The weather's warming up, so the ball's going to be flying a little bit more, but you need your offense to be able to bounce back and have some key innings, and then you're going to need your pitching to be able to shut down just inning at a time, scratching out outs.
Yeah, you want to talk about offense. I mean, the margin of victory for this UNT team was 7.25 runs over this 4-game stretch in the tournament. That's unbelievable. They're killing these other teams. 2 mercy rules in a row on Saturday. I mean, they made light work of these guys in the tournament. And so hopefully, that hot stretch of bats can carry over against a team like Tech, because down the stretch of the season, if you don't win that game, you're going to have to play other teams like Oklahoma State, like Wichita State, who is #1 in conference right now, Baylor, as well as South Florida. All these series are coming up, so it'd be very nice for this team to get started with, some momentum going into that conference play.
Yeah, 1,000%. It's going to be a huge game against Texas Tech, and it would be a huge upset. You don't really see a lot of ranked teams coming to Denton, but it is a home game. It's going to be a huge one. So, Gabe, what would this mean for UNC if they can pull off this upset?
It boosts the team morale so much. We talk about facing previous Power 4 teams and how, Mississippi State, it was close up until the end, and then they couldn't finish out, end up getting smacked. They went and beat Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, while not as good of a team as Mississippi State or Texas Tech as we're upcoming face, I'm hoping that type of game gives them confidence. That was 2 weekends ago. We need all the confidence we can going into this Power 4, because the confidence that we had from that, if you can win this game, you have a limited confidence. Going into Wichita State, like Parker was saying, is the #1 team in the conference, projected in this preseason and everything. Well, if you beat Tech, you can for sure beat Wichita State, you can for sure beat South Florida. And so it would be a historic win almost, I think it'd be fair to say. One of the biggest wins since we went to Oklahoma State a couple years back and almost took them to the regional final in Stillwater. And so it would just do so much for the program. It would get fans invested, the amount that it would help with the crowds, beating a team like this would be incredible. There'd be so much that would go into the win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the best start in program history. They are 12-2 right now, and the best they've ever been before that was 8-2, which they got like 4 times in the last 5 years. It was pretty crazy. So they finally kind of broke through that threshold of that 8-2 start. They won 4 games this past weekend, and if you can beat a team like Tech, I mean, you're talking about UNT as a team that might even get some votes to be an AP top 25 team in the next poll. So this is going to be absolutely huge for them. This game, I mean, I hope some fans show up and show the support for the Mean Green softball team, because this is definitely going to be a big game for us.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. Coming up next, we're going to talk about what the NBA needs to do to get its ratings back up.
I use Flex to buy my favorite snacks.
I use Flex to get me through my mornings.
I use Flex at my favorite campus restaurants. I love how Flex is a cashless payment method and can be used at all campus dining venues.
So, how do you use Flex?
Are you looking for a fun club with travel opportunities? Dive into the UNT Swim Club. Practicing Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Pole Recreation Center. We accept members at any skill level. For more information, reach out to us at unt.swimclub on Instagram.
Looking to open a free checking or savings account but don't know where to start? Check out DATQ Credit Union right here on campus. Get your Mean Green debit card instantly or apply for a DATQ Visa credit card today. Your school, your card. Plus, make deposits at their 24/7 ATM, checks or cash whenever you need it. Make sure to sign up for DATQ's online banking platform and mobile app for easy access anytime, anywhere. Visit them at www.datq.org to learn more. DATQ, the official financial institution of UNT Athletics.
Welcome back in the Sports Zone. Now, to wrap things up, the NHL and the NBA both had their All-Star weekends and both had completely different results. Here to talk about it with me today is Ian Cropper and Gunnar Talbot. Now, while the NHL broke records, demolished any old records they had over the All-Star break, the NBA saw record lows in their numbers. So let's stick with the NHL first. The NHL obviously had the Four Nations face-off. Ian, I'll start with you. What did they do right?
Well, I think they injected a lot of life into the event by doing a new format, and there was a reason for it. They're preparing the players in the NHL for the return to international play, but it had a lot of strengths. Like, unlike the NBA, it was a proper tournament over multiple days. You had full games. There were no skills competitions, so it was only on the ice. But the biggest thing for me is that every player was invested in this. Like, something that really stuck out to me, Matthew Tkachuk, the star forward for the Florida Panthers and a key player for Team America in this tournament, said this was the biggest game he had ever played. Keep in mind that he just played in a Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final where he had to avoid his team getting reverse swept. So for him to say this was the biggest game he had ever played, that is insane. And it shows you that everyone was putting their souls on the ice in a way the NBA stars just weren't on the court.
Clearly, NHL did something right, all right? They had 16.1 million viewers for that championship game between Canada and America. That's what you see Sunday night football games getting, right? You know, they did it right because me, a guy who rarely watches hockey, I watch Stanley Cup playoffs and some Stars games occasionally. They had me on Thursday night for that America-Canada game, locked into my TV, cheering for America. That's like when you can reach people, extra fans for like that people that don't really watch their sport over basically an all-star break during this little weird time in sports where there's not a lot going on, they achieved their goal.
Yeah, 1,000%. It was such a success for the NHL. Like you mentioned, 16.1 million viewers, but as opposed to the NBA, they had record low numbers, like I mentioned, 4.7 million viewers. That's their second lowest mark ever. Gunnar, I'll start with you. What did the NBA do wrong?
Well, the 4.7 million views is actually down like 20% from last year when it was 5.5 or 5.6. What they did wrong was prioritizing the event as the product over the players as the product, right? They wanted to make it about the whole weekend, and it's about, the TNT crew, this, that. When there was more Kevin Hart bad jokes given the TNT people fishing gear than actual minutes of the games. And that was the worst thing, was that the games weren't bad. Compared to last year, the year before, it's like the players were trying a little bit harder, but it wasn't nearly as like what hockey did. And then another issue for the NBA is when you got people like Draymond Green that they paid to promote the event, announcing, and the entire weekend basically just trashing it like, they're not trying, this is what's wrong. It's like, that's what you have a podcast for. No one wants to hear that on national broadcast when the NBA is paying you to, hey, promote this, hey, make this interesting, and you spend 2 hours talking about how bad it is.
Ian?
Yeah, and even if there was an increase in the level to which the players cared, it still clearly wasn't on par with the Four Nations tournament. Like, you had guys beating each other on the ice. You just didn't see anywhere close to that passion from the NBA stars. And honestly, why would you? The All-Star game is kind of pointless in the grand scheme of things. It also doesn't help that, although I like the tournament format, each game was only played to 40 points. In 3 hours, you had 42 total minutes of basketball. A typical NBA game is 48 hours, and that's just 48 minutes, sorry. And that's just one game.
You see teams scoring 40 points in the first quarter these days.
Exactly.
And also, think about social media, right? When I opened up Instagram after the first Four Nations game, I saw America and Canada fighting each other, caring, booing the national anthem, like getting my blood boiling. When I opened my Instagram over All-Star break, I saw Wemby and Chris Paul chucking up shots, not even trying, all right? That's the difference. Like, the players are what makes it matters. The players are the products. And when you got players just not trying, doing this, doing that, it ruins the whole weekend.
Yeah, I mean, surely that's why NBA games feel like they're 48 hours, right? I mean, it does seem like there is more care into a competition like the Four Nations tournament rather than an All-Star break, because All-Star breaks can feel like vacations for players. So in the near future, do you think, Gunnar, the NBA should incorporate something like this? We know Adam Silver loves his tournaments.
Yeah, of course he does. I think maybe not, it doesn't even really have to be tournament style. It could just be Team USA, Team International, right? And you saw this during the Olympics, right? Players don't care if they're playing for Chuck or Shaq for a TNT crew, but you put like your country's flag on your back, okay, now there's some pride, now there's some want to win. And the biggest thing is like the Europeans, the two people trying the most during that finals game, or the championship game, I guess, were Wemby and Jokic. And I think if you got a team of international players to play against a team of USA, these players all their lives have heard of how how America's better at basketball, how America's this, and they just lost to America at the Olympics. They're going to come out with some fire, and they're going to make their Team USA compete because Team USA doesn't want to get, embarrassed on national television. So I think that would be a lot more interesting.
Yeah, Ian?
Yeah, I do think a world team has some potential, but I don't think you can recapture the same fervor that you had in Four Nations because you can't have Four Nations. Like, there just aren't enough international players in the NBA for each country to get their own team. A thing that I think goes overshadowed about the Four Nations tournament, there weren't just 4 countries that were eligible for teams. There were 6. Russia was excluded because they have been excluded from a lot of international hockey events since the invasion of Ukraine, which is the 3-year anniversary of. God bless Ukrainians. And Czechia, they just drew the short stick. Like, they were the weakest of the remaining nations. So NBA has that international star presence that the NBA just doesn't have, and I don't think rooting for a world team has the same power as rooting for just your country. Like, if you're a French person, rooting for Team France is a lot more powerful than rooting for Team International. Now, with that said, I do think that a big factor behind the success of the Four Nations tournament is that, while this isn't a politics show, the U.S. has not been getting along kindly with a lot of the countries involved, particularly Canada. So I do think the forces of nationalism and national pride could motivate a lot of people to support a national team or an international team against the U.S. in an NBA tournament.
See, where I differ, the first point you said about, people not having national pride, like if it was just one international world team. But what we forget is the main people watching this game are Americans, right? So they're going to be rooting for the American team nonetheless. And when you have the stars, like just the starting 5 could be, Shea, Luka, Wemby, Jokic, and so on. It's like that's what's going to draw the numbers. Because me as an American fan, I would have the national pride for the USA, and you don't really have the viewership from the other countries anyway, and you could get that viewership from America just by having a team with, probably the 5 best players in the world being the international team and then, the American team.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I would say.
It really does seem like international play kind of moves the needle in a way for a lot of ratings. We think back to the Olympics, how successful that was in the numbers. So do you think international play with big stars like you mentioned, Wemby, Jokic, Giannis, do you think that's the key for the NBA in these future All-Star breaks?
I think that's one of the keys for the future All-Star breaks. But I think, we talk about it every single year. But, Rachel Nichols over All-Star break did some great reporting where she went around, she asked a lot of players like Kyrie, James Harden, Ant about the future of a 1v1 tournament. And a lot of them were very excited and were wanting to do it. And I guess I would turn around to you, what would you guys think about the 1v1 tournament?
Ian, I'll go with you first.
I think that has a lot of potential. There are a lot of aspects of the game that you don't see because it's a team sport. If a player has weaknesses, you can see them minimized by their teammates. But a 1v1 tournament, really just players have to put everything on the field. It's kind of rewards the most holistic, well-rounded player. And I think that could be something really interesting, especially if the right financial incentives are there to get the players to put in the effort.
Yeah, I think we can meet in the middle here. I think we can have an international 1v1 tournament. Like, the U.S. just picks one player that they think would win, like Kevin Durant versus Wemby. Tell me that wouldn't feed families.
That'd be awesome.
That would be
That
great.
would be amazing.
I think another, a subset of it would be, how cool would it be you pick, say, 8, all team NBA players, something like 8 stars, and 8 role players. Because a lot of people, there's kind of a thing around the NBA where the best 1v1 players are the Cam Reddishes and the role players. So if you got, KD versus, I don't know, Jared Allen or something, someone who's not technically on KD's level, that would just make the 1v1 tournament so much more special because it's now that's pride for KD. Because KD's, I don't want to lose to that guy.
Yeah.
These are some bold ideas, but the thing about the NBA All-Star Game is that the only place to go is up. And even if you don't want to do something,
say that.
even if you don't want to do something this radical, there are plenty of changes you could make, mainly just increasing the stakes, give the players the right financial incentives to bring all of these All-Star games, make it an actual tournament maybe. Like I said, I don't hate the tournament idea, but you need actual games, not just first to 40 points. And finally get the stars to actually participate in some of the skills competitions. I know we haven't talked much about that, but the lack of stars there was really harmful. Aside from Mac McClune winning the slam dunk contest, there really wasn't much there.
Yeah, very well said, Ian. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for another episode of Sportszone. Make sure you stay tuned on Thursday for their episode.